welcome back to this third in a three-part series on customer success. This is a wonderful webinar series that we have done over the last couple of weeks, bringing it all to you, bringing it all together in this final session about scaling customer success. My name is Annette Franz, and I am founder and CEO of CX Journey Inc., and I'm also an advisor for cast.app. Thanks for joining us again. Joining me for this conversation today is this wonderful panel that you've seen on the last two sessions of this series. I've got Wayne McCulloch, who is Chief Customer Officer at WalkMe, Jeff Heckler, who is Director of Customer Success Solutions for MarketSource Inc., and last but not least, Dickey Singh, who is a friend of mine, and he is co-founder and CEO of cast.app. We are about to have another lively discussion about customer success and customer success at scale. So we're going to get started. And the first part of this topic or this session is going to be around journey mapping. Now, journey mapping is probably one of my favorite topics, right? I talk a lot about it and write a lot about it. My book is about it. So there's all of that. So what is journey mapping? It's a tool and it's a process where we walk in our customers' shoes with our customers, mapping their experience in their steps from their perspective. What we're doing is we are capturing what they're doing, thinking, and feeling as they interact with our brand. So let me throw it out to the panel because one of the things that we talked about as we prepared for this session was some of the different types of journey maps. And Wayne, I'm going to throw it out to you because you talk about in your book, which we've mentioned in the last two sessions, vendor journey maps, customer journey maps, churn journey maps, and then customer versus user maps. So let's talk about those at a high level. And I think we want to focus specifically on those churn maps because I think that's probably a new concept to a lot of folks.
No, thanks, Annette. And like customer journey maps, I think people are really familiar with. Doesn't mean they're really good at them, doesn't mean they know how to do them, but they understand what it is, right? Let's map out the journey, identify moments of truth, and understand who's responsible for showing up and make sure it's great. But what I learned a long time ago, I used a third-party company called ThirdSide, and the CEO over there, Ron, was doing a bunch of churn interviews. I'm a big fan of having third-party company do churn interviews because what I found is when I did an A/B test is customers, if you're the vendor talking to churn customers, they either don't want to talk to you because they just got rid of you for a reason. B, they don't want to get someone in trouble. So they don't want to say anything bad, because you could be their manager or something like that. And then thirdly, that they don't tell the truth most often, or they don't actually know the truth, really. They just say, oh, well, we just didn't get value. Well, I don't know what that means. So I brought in a third-party company and we talked to these churn customers and we never ask them why they leave, ever. It's not one question we ask. What we ask is, tell us about your experience during the pre-sales process. Tell us about your experience onboarding or implementing or using support or using success or invoicing. Like we ask all these questions and what we get is this massive map of information. People just literally give you, and they bring in people to tell you how bad you are and they love it because they're just like, yay, let's tell them. Not always, but sometimes. But what you then do is you can tag these common themes you see. So for example, at WalkMe before I joined, I gave 3 months notice. I actually asked them to do this interview process for 3 months before I got there. And so when I arrived, automatically I knew what the churn journey map was, which really is a reflection of what the 8 most common experiences WalkMe customers had had before they churned. And you can map them out from pre-sale through to implementation, through to post-implementation, through to renewal. You can map out 8 common experiences that were horrific. Individually, not enough to churn, but collectively, it's time maybe. And so as a CCO, I can use this churn journey map to immediately understand where to deploy resources and focus to just say, before I know anything else about the business, the product, the market, anything, I can look at this and know that these are broken processes I need to fix immediately. And if I fix those, that's going to have some impact. Might be a little, might be a lot, but it's going to have some impact on the experience that our new customers coming in are going to have. And so for me, a churn journey map is taking that concept of a journey map on how to be great and what does amazing look like. And this is our aspirational desire to go do good. It's actually saying this is the reality, this is what's happened, and we've got to do better. And that's what a churn journey map is.
So in the last session, we talked about customer health score and some of those metrics. How do those metrics tie in with that churn map? I would imagine they do come into play at some point there.
Yeah, I think there's really good examples here of actually taking whatever customer health scores you have. Every company is different. I'm not going to say WalkMe is sophisticated in the way it thinks about customer health, but it has some data about usage. And what you understand here is actually, in our case, there wasn't a lot of correlation, because what we were thinking was important for customer health, usage, license utilization, number of support tickets, didn't actually show up on the churn journey map at all. Like, the things we were measuring were not the right things. And that's why customer health scores are a bit of a trap, because A, you don't really know what to measure, and then it takes a long time to work that out, and you make decisions based on stuff that may or may not matter. But we can go back to webinar 2 for that. But really what I discovered was the churn journey map actually helped me think about the customer health score in a very different manner. The health is not about usage in the product. Where we had problems was the experience. How easy was it to do this? How simple was it to get this answer? I'll give you a really simple example. When a customer goes over their license usage, we will send them a non-compliance letter. You're using more than you paid for. You need to pay us more, right? I'm like, maybe the experience is celebratory. Send them cupcakes and say, hey, you're using more licenses than we even thought you would use. That means we're getting value. That means we're getting momentum. We're finding more opportunities for value. Let's get together and talk about what the next 12 months looks like. And maybe we can get some sort of discounting in to buy more license. Like, that's upselling right there. That's you taking the opportunity to behave differently as a company to reflect what you want to be from an experience standpoint. And so the churn journey map helps identify these type of things that I don't think like traditional health scores would come out of the box just doing.
I think that's a great example. I love that example. And I think you make a great point too about metrics. I think a lot of companies track metrics that they think they should track versus talking to customers and figuring out what's important to them. And those are the metrics that we should really be tracking. So, all right, let's dive into moments of truth, and scaling moments of truth, right? So I typically define moments of truth as those make or break moments in the customer experience or in the customer journey, right? Where do it well, execute it well, the customer has a great experience, they're going to keep going, either finish whatever it is they're doing, or they'll come back for more, right? Whereas, the opposite, the break moment where the opposite happens and it's not so great. So how do you guys, Jeff, I'll start with you. How do you define moments of truth? This will be important because we want to talk about scaling those. And so we want to have a good baseline of what they are.
Sure. I think I might be able to unite what Wayne just mentioned with what we spoke about earlier in segment 2 that we recorded. So what matters to us as a company in the old days was how many logged in, what are they getting into the product, their usage and stuff. And our customers don't buy so they can log into our product or simply just use the product. They do go for those value moments that Wayne just mentioned. In the world of SaaS, I think, especially in the PLG model, 2 of those very easy ones to identify are, do they have integrations? And so are we able to embed ourselves with the workflows that exist within our customer, number 1. And then number 2 is the old box and drop box. Are they importing their own data, right? They're doing the imports and so they have all this click in integrations and templatized integrations to get them into the product. So those moments of value are okay to start but they really just tell you that they've initiated the process. Doesn't mean that they've gone beyond that. And so what you want to do at scale is figure out, well, particular to what your product does and going all the way back to what pains is your product solving, and how do those happen in your product? When do those activate? And when those occur in the onboarding and then the customer cycle through your product vision, and you want to obviously get with your product people to make sure that you're aligned on that product marketing, but also from your customer standpoint, where are the aha moments for them? Where do they come back to you and say, oh, this is when we really won, and this is something that brought life to us and as an organization. And so those are the tertiary, the next level items that you're looking for.
Dickey, how do you define moments of truth?
Yeah, so I think of them as every interaction that a customer has with a business, whether it's with a human being or with the product or with the website, like that kind of needs to be positive. So those emotional experiences, they need to be positive. And the ones that are like negative can be used as opportunities, right? So Whether they're visiting the website, do they have a positive experience? So these, when a customer talks to a salesperson or an account manager or a CSM, we can provide those like white glove services for them, right? We can like really dig in and like find out, but these are kind of hard to provide once you are talking to people on the website, or you're trying to do that at scale, right? Like, for going back to the triangle pyramid from the previous webinar, yes, you may be providing white glove services to the executive sponsored and named accounts or so, but not to the accounts that do not have CSM. So how do you do that digitally? So I think everything for me is that moment of truth. So.
Okay, Wayne, how do you define them?
Yeah, I subscribe to Dickey's definition. It's any interaction someone has with your brand, whether that be through the product, through people, through website. And moments of truth, they're just opportunities for someone to make a decision on, I love this company, this is annoying me. Like literally that's what you're trying to do simplistically. And so the ability to be able to map out all the moments of truth, to then determine who owns that moment of truth and ensure that we're actually measuring the impact of that moment of truth. And so people know where they can help, especially outside of the CCO organization, like whether it's the marketing team with the website, when you click a sort of link and it's like, oh, page not found. You're like, well, that's kind of weird. Like that doesn't give you great confidence that they can build a product that runs my mission critical processes if they can't do a web. Like these are the things that swirl in people's heads. And so being able to identify the moments of truth, who owns them and know if they're good or bad, gives you a great starting point as far as like, uniting the company. When you talk about customer centricity, I dare you to go find a company that says they're not customer centric. You're like, I'll give you 3 years to go do it and come back to me when you find that company, right? It really doesn't exist. Everyone thinks they're customer centric. Everyone wants to be customer centric, but the reality is the processes, the systems, the way we measure things determine if we're customer centric or not to the customer. And that's the gap. And moments of truth provide the linkage between the desire to be customer centric and actually acting in a customer centric way.
Yep, I agree. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we scale this, right? So Dickey, I'm gonna throw it out to you. A couple of things, right? How do you, first of all, how do you define scaling customer success? And then how do you scale these moments of truth?
So scaling customer success is, again, a huge thing, right? Like it means different things for different people. It could be serving more accounts with the CSMs you have. It could be like serving more accounts as a company, maybe not using CSMs all the time. It could be also serving more users at your account. In other words, instead of like presenting to an account, what if you could like talk one-on-one with the CCO, one-on-one with the VP, one-on-one with the individual contributor, like serving more people. And in other words, if you are able to scale in that way, like, you'll get more stickiness. Why? Because you're providing value to the C-level guy, you're providing value to the VP and the director level guys, and providing value to the individual contributors. Scaling could also be, there's research that shows that if you speak in the lingo of your customer, not language, but in the lingo of, and this is something that Wayne was mentioning in the previous one also, like if you talk in their lingo, they're 2.7 times more likely to perform an action that you have asked them to perform, right? So, and again, there's also research that talks about if you're just sharing like a blog, or if you're just sharing a single modality thing versus as two modalities, something that you can hear and read, something that you can hear and watch, right? It's 68:10 ratio, where people will be more responsive to something like that. So that's also like scaling like how you reach customers, scaling like what does the customer prefer? Does he prefer to read? Does he prefer to watch? Does he prefer like a tweet of a QBR versus as a 45-minute QBR? So all those things come into play.
Wayne, how do you define it and how do you scale those moments of truth?
Yeah, I think Dickey's right, because scale means different things to different people. Most commonly, we think of scale as like, how do I get more from the same amount of resources, right? So that we can agree that's a good definition, I guess, of like scale. Is the way I think about it is I get a budget every year. And my job is to work out how to make that budget have the biggest impact for our customers. That's to me, that's scale. So when I'm thinking of scale, I'm like, well, then what is that budget giving me today? Well, I have a customer community. Well, I got to leverage that more for scale, because that is a classic scaling mechanism. It's technology. It's a one-to-many. I can bring people together. It's a many-to-many in some situations. And so how am I leveraging that from a success standpoint? Like, most people think about, well, I got to have CSMs, then I can have a low touch CSM. I got to have a digital CSM. And I'm like, no, you got to think broader than that. Is what are all the resources we have available to maximize the impact we can have for our customers' success? That's what scale is. So that encompasses way more than people and roles and technology. It encompasses a strategy of bringing together the limited resources you have to have maximum impact.
I love it. I love it. Jeff?
Well, Dickey handled operational, and then Wayne covered strategic. So I'll take it for customer value. I'll give you an example from a previous life not too long ago. We had major pieces of functionality that we're rolling out. So we'll take the customer journey map, some surveying, and then some CS at scale, and digitalize that and we'll wrap them all up. So you roll out the piece of functionality. When that gets initiated by your customer, you give them 14 days and you hit them with a very short survey. So if it met their needs, their expectations, what were the value derived out of it, and then a long form typed in answer for them. And then you take that in those interviews and those surveys and you collate what are the relative items that keep popping up. Where were the friction points? We want to lower friction and drive value. And so you take whatever, it could be a digital enablement piece of learning, a quick in-app message, a video at scale to the customers that have engaged with that piece of new functionality, and then broaden that out and make that message to the community. And that happens a lot quicker than rolling something into the mission from product that would help to lower the same piece of friction. So it's enabling the functionality, serving them shortly after that enablement, learning from their customers what worked and what didn't, and then hitting that with a digital piece of enablement that scales from the CS side of the house.
Nice, good stuff. Let's jump to a topic that is really hot in customer success, which is playbooks, right? Everybody's talking about playbooks today. So positive and negative moments of truth trigger those playbooks. So how do we scale or digitize those playbooks? Dickey, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, okay, I'll say this, that I learned about playbooks very recently, but my thinking has evolved quite a bit. And that's when I was thinking about, like, we talked about like reactive customer success in the last session, right? I think that's very important, right? You are looking for patterns. So in my mind, a CSM should be more of a CSA, which is like an advisor, versus as a manager. They should be problem solvers versus as like doing the same mundane things that can be automated or so, right? Because I'm like very, so they should be like problem solvers. So when they see something new that they have not solved, they should write it down. They see it a second time, a third time. Hey, this is occurring again and again. Let's create a playbook for this. And what is the playbook? Just basically like maybe some documentation or something like, hey, when something like this happens, these are the steps to follow, and I can do that. Now, okay, great. So you have that playbook. Now you see that happening like 50 times, 60 times. How can you take that playbook and try to automate that? So that's the third step, right? Beyond that. And by that, I mean is, why do you need to trigger it to the CSM? Why can't it be triggered directly to the customer? And it could be as simple as, here's something you need to know, end of story. It could be, here is something you need to know, and here is the action you need to perform. Very simple, no explanation needed. It could be, here is some information we need. You send them a form, they fill in the form, you get the information, you nudge them, you haven't filled the form, put them on a drip campaign, whatever the terminology is. And the third is, you want them to perform an action, but you have to explain it to them. And that's where like a QBR presentation might come in. The goal of a QBR presentation is not to just tell people something, is to like drive them to take an action. All the terms that we use, cross-sell, upsell, uptell, cross-tell, those are like vendor specific terms, right? Like we are thinking, but we should not be saying that, hey, I'm trying to cross-sell you to the customer, right? So that to the customer, what is that? In my mind, that is a recommendation. And I even go further and kind of build on top of like moments of truth, like, it's a moment of action, and it is personalized for the right user, the right message, the right level of the user, like the CC level person or the individual contributor. And then you combine that, and I'm calling it like the personalized moment of action. That's what you like share with the user, a recommendation. And when it is shared as recommendation, there's no pressure for them to buy or something. Maybe they're here again a second time. Maybe, we talk about product adoption as telling the user, hey, you adopt the product. What about telling the CCO who is allocating time for their people to use the product, right? So show them the ROI. Like, hey, if product adoption is not just for the users, it's also for the people who are paying for it, right?
Yeah,
so that's how I kind of think of this. I don't know whether I even answered the question or created more questions, but there you go.
All right, Jeff, you want to weigh in on that?
No, I'll pass the mic to Wayne. I think Dickey handled it.
I'll get a little more tactical when, playbooks are great and it's just repeatable best practices at scale. And they can be tailored and personalized, obviously, for the situation, but really it's all of these assets and learnings of the past packaged up to be delivered. And I think of playbooks sort of happening in 5 different ways. So there's life cycle sort of stage triggers that trigger playbooks. So onboarding, adoption, renewal, things that happen during the life cycle. We need playbooks that define what are best practices and how do we go, improve when there's challenges and issues. How do we maximize value when it's working well, around advocacy, et cetera. Then there's customer event triggers. So things like there's a drop in usage, there's a change of sponsor, there's a low NPS score. We should have a playbook for how do we get rid of the NPS score. No, I'm just kidding. Like those playbooks are really important for the customer sort of driven events. And then you have scheduled event triggers. So things like EBRs and QBRs or a renewal. That is a scheduled event. We know what's happening. Build a playbook because we're going to do it all the time. So let's do it really efficiently and effectively and learn from it and keep making it better. Then you have sort of CSM defined triggers. They might have an opportunity for an uptell. They can put in a CSQL, a customer success qualified lead. They might deliver some sort of customer webinar or event inside the organization. And then there's vendor driven triggers, which are a new release, customer conference. These are things that, if you define them in these categories, you start documenting what are those life cycle or customer or vendor, or what are those events that happen? What are those things that happen that we can create a playbook, that we can, what we call collective wisdom, bring all of our knowledge on what works and what doesn't as a team and codify it into a playbook that can be enabled people on. It's a great way to accelerate onboarding of new people into the organization. Like, we don't have to teach them. It's sort of already developed and built for them. The assets are there and they can just tweak it really quickly and deliver without having to start from scratch, excuse me, every time. And that's how I think about playbooks.
Awesome. Dickey, how do you scale to users at an account?
Before I answer that, I really appreciate differentiating playbooks at stage, what Wayne said earlier on, during adoption, during retention, during offboarding, or any of those kind of things. Everything can have a playbook. So say your question again. Sorry, because I got caught up in that.
No, and great point. And I love the 5 different ways that you can use those playbooks. And yeah, definitely a great. I was taking notes as you said that because I was like, oh, I've not heard that before, so that's cool. The question was,
I recommend a book for you to read, and it's really
there.
I'm almost
There's a table also in the book. So.
I'm still working through it. Scaling to users at an account. How do we do that?
So a QBR, as I've always said, is presented to the account, right? You get like 5-6 people into this and you're showing like the same stuff. And then you're making like 20 recommendations, out of which like 17 may be important to, maybe 3 may be important to the CCO, 3 may be important to the VP, as I keep saying, and then a few may be important to the individual contributor. When you're scaling this to the user, you don't have to show 20 recommendations. You show maybe the top three that the CCO is interested in, like maybe related to ROI or so to that. And a more tactical and operational related stuff, show it to the VP, right? Show the renewals to the VP. you show the upsells and cross-sells to the VP, but show the value of upsells and cross-sells to the CCO. And to the individual contributor, you are showing like how they can look good to their VP, and then how the VP can look good to their CCO, right? Whatever the chain works, right? So you're like basically personalizing it by the role, personalizing the message. And that's what I meant when in the first webinar, we said that in tools like Autopilot, or which is prospect marketing, you have like 10, 15 variables to play with. And you say, hello, Wayne, hello, Annette, hello, Jeff, and the message is the same. But in customer success, we have like hundreds of thousands of variables. So, and you have to incorporate that. And then one way of incorporating that is like creating a summary of what you want to say to each individual person.
Yep. Awesome. All right, we're down to our last couple of minutes, so I'm going to do a speed round on the final 2 questions that I want to ask about. Okay, so you guys ready? All right. How do you scale advocacy? Now, here's a big one. How do you scale advocacy? Is that even possible? Wayne, I'll start with you.
Yes, you scale advocacy through understanding advocacy is more than just references. It's more than just blog posts. It's more than just advocacy. Like I've identified at least 11 different types of advocacy. And so understanding what each of them are and then how you can scale it is obviously a challenge we focus on. But technology is a great one. There's a lot of self-service advocacy tools out there now. People don't need a high production video. You can just use your cell phone and capture it there. And people are used to seeing it that way. So don't inhibit yourself by trying to get perfect and do the traditional ways. Go guerrilla style, grab all your advocacy moments in the moments, more authentic anyway. That's how you'll scale it.
Yeah. How do you scale advocacy?
Jeff?
Oh, sorry. I think you'll like this one, and that it's about every place where the customer has an experience with your brand. So if you're in community, if they're organizing there, they're advocating on all those uptell and uptell ways. So every customer experience through all the enablement channels that they have in which they're sharing within each other. And so that's the use cases. That is the things at scale that translate across your brand. The referral, all the public websites and all of the events that you do, whether they're webinars, in-person events, et cetera, that you have your customers with you. And so we all know our customers tell our stories much better than us. So it's in all of those ways that are grand and large, as well as the ones that are small, like in their telling ways.
Awesome. And Dickey, how would you scale advocacy?
I think you have to have a combination of like some automated ways of like collecting information and asking for, and also in person, like, talking to like people, and you will get cues like whether, so one of our customers, Control Up, says like, I don't understand what cast.app does, but I fell in love with the concept of automating this, right? So he's not even a customer yet, and then he is willing to advocate for us, right? So which goes a really long way. So one of my things is, don't look for established customers who have been renewed after a year to be advocates. We are like a young company, so we have advocates. We have people like Brian Lafayette, who worked for like Wayne. He was talking about like cast.app, and 3 weeks later somebody sent me a video, right? So those are the kind of things that I love hearing. So just wherever the person is and the user is in their life cycle, ask for them to be advocates.
I love it. I love it. Okay, last question, and this is a big one, and we truly are. This is the real speed round. How do you scale strategic advice? Is that even possible? Wayne?
Absolutely. So if we know our product and we know our customer, and if you add on the third one, which is the industry, those 3 things gives you the element of being strategic. With the 2 of the 3 does not. So if you can find a way to actually segment, to create the opportunity to verticalize inside any of your customer facing organizations, you enhance the ability for you to be strategic. So the ability for you to structure your org in that way, to deliver the information, the knowledge, the education they need, you can actually become very strategic at scale.
Awesome. Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back, and it was before the speed round, back to Dickey's comments as well. It's all about segmentation, and so the further using analytics and BI that you can most accurately segment your customers, you'll be able to scale all of these motions that you want to drive value with your customers and for your company. And that's where it all lies.
Awesome. And Dickey, I'll give you final.
Yeah, in my mind, like, as I was saying, like upsells, cross-sells are also recommendations, right? Providing strategic advice is also a recommendation. And the way you figure it out is like, if, again, extend the playbooks, or extend like, if these are the cases, or these are the things, this is the advice that the customer needs at this point in their journey. So you can like import that right away. But at the same time, as I was calling, like CSMs should be CSAs, like advisors, right? So, and problem solvers. So, the CSM roles needs to be elevated, right? Like they, not just in making more money, but like being able to provide such kind of advice is one. I was taking notes when like Wayne was talking about like the 3 things that you need to know the industry for sure. I mean, I always miss the industry because we keep thinking in terms of like vendors, whereas thinking in terms of the customer. So that's the part that I learned and I wrote it down. And you have to like include that when you're giving strategic advice.
Agreed. Lots of great strategic advice here in this session, guys. Lots of really good stuff. Thank you for your time for this session, for the last 2. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this session. If you missed the first 2, please go back and watch those. I know there will be links below to take you back to be able to see those as well. I hope you enjoyed these sessions. I hope you learned a few things. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we look forward to talking to y'all very soon. Thank you guys for a wonderful 3-part series.
Thank you, Annette.
Thanks, Annette.